If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths and sometimes heights to ensure the power is always flowing, which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Join us and unwind with a good book. Welcome to Relaxing Reads.
Hi, it's Deb in Halifax.
Hi, it's Simone in Vancouver.
Hey, it's Tanya in Edmonton.
Our latest read, Study for Obedience from Sarah Bernstein, tells the story of a young woman who moves from the place of her birth to the remote northern country of her forebears to be housekeeper to her brother, whose wife has recently left him. Soon after arriving, a series of inexplicable events occur: deaths of cattle, the demise of a ewe and her lamb, a local dog's phantom pregnancy, a potato blight too. She notices that locals suspect she might be the cause or the reason. It explores themes of guilt, abuse, and prejudice through the eyes of its unreliable narrator. Okay, ladies. Lots of things wandering through my mind. A lot of empty questions.
I think as I was reading this book, I had this thought that said, what is going on? Running through my head. What is going on? What is going on? Yeah.
I picked up the book and I was like, yes, a short read. I'm going to get this done in a day. And then I was like 10 pages in and I was like, this is going to take me a month. Definitely a
Same
lot.
thing for me.
It's a lot going on, but not a lot going on, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I did pick it up a couple of times and like, oh, big words. Oh, my brain fog isn't accepting these big words. And now they're in different places and I don't know how to unscramble them. But then once I did get through, I don't know how many pages, I thought, ooh, okay. So now we've got some weird things happening. And I was into it and I was feeling for this character whose name we don't have a name for. But I was really feeling for her, but also very confused about so many things happening around her.
It's interesting you say that, but that's just it. We don't have a name. We don't have a location. We don't have much information. And we don't know enough about the other characters in the book. Like, it's a very insightful and informative, but it's also very vague in a way. Right?
Yeah. And I think maybe that vagueness, like I always like to, when I'm reading books, I always like to think sort of in practical terms almost and just go, okay, I'm going to like take this book and the frame of it in my mind is going to be this and all of this makes sense. So when an author writes in such a way that everything is just sort of like, I can't kind of place it in my mind as to who the narrator is, where she is, all of that stuff is fuzzy. And I keep trying to make sense, right? I keep kind of trying to maybe put it into a box, which I don't think the author intended. I think in a way it's sort of this journey that we go on as readers and we maybe have to say to ourselves, this doesn't, like, we can't put it into a box. It's like everything happens and nothing happens in this book. And we just sort of have to go along on the ride. And I think we've heard, Simone and Deb, we've heard that, when people read this book, they have to get the most out of it or to get the flow is to read it in one go. Just read the whole thing and everything will just sort of flow from there. And I started the book and I put it down. I started the book, I put it down. And then finally I did give it, a good stab just to kind of get it going. And it was better trying to get it going in one go. But I kind of let go my mind's, always wanting to put everything to make sense. And I'm not saying that this book didn't make sense. It's just my mind was sort of trying to give it a lot of structure that it certainly didn't have. And I think once I got over that conflict of my own mind and just let the author's words and the narrator just become this other thing, it got better. I kept fighting it, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, I think reading it became challenging, and that's what often, like, I went and looked at the reviews because, sometimes you read something, you're like, am I the only one struggling here? But there were people who were kind of saying similar things, but they were like, I'm so glad I picked it up a second time and gave it a read in one go. And the other great thing is I'm not an audiobook person. I usually like to read. But for this one, when I found out Sarah actually narrates the audiobook, I went on and I decided that I was going to give that a go. And I listened, and there were parts where I was like, I'm so happy that she's explaining this to me in her own words. It almost helped for a lot of the parts. So I kind of half audiobooked, half read, because the audiobook definitely goes a little bit slower and I can read faster. But I'm happy I did that because there were some things that she just helped create or helped me better understand with her own words and the way she explained things. So I needed to almost be told from her perspective rather than me try to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, because I felt like it was either high school or college in an English class where they're like, you just interpret it however you wish. Like, whatever you come up with, that's your interpretation. And the next person might have something else. There are no wrong answers in what your thoughts are about this reading. But I'm very interested to find out if that's what she meant, if she did leave it out for everyone. I mean, Simone, maybe you could hear her tones and hear something a little different than when we read and we hear our own voice when we're going through the pages.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what also kept me going with this book was just kind of figuring out what was going to happen. Is this going to be some kind of a horror story? Is there like the mystery that's embedded in it? And why is the relationship with the brother the way it is? And why do the townspeople feel a certain way towards her? It felt like there was just more searching to do and something deeper to look into with that. And so that's why I was just intrigued along the way. And that kind of helped me keep going with it.
Yeah. And I was trying to figure out, Sarah gives us clues all over the book and as to maybe where they're from or both her brother and the narrator are Jewish. And as I was reading the book and I was seeing the people of the town making symbols or signs with their hands, the fact that they spoke a different language, and the narrator, even though she'd gone to university and she picked up languages very well, she could not figure out this language. And just sort of the general mistrust. And the author sort of weaves in, the modern world with sort of like a world that is very old and traditional. And I kept thinking I kept trying to place trying to figure out where her brother and her were from. And I was thinking, are they Hasidic Jews, right? Because that culture is very, they do keep to themselves and they don't, they have their own rules and all of that. And certainly some of the things that involve women, there was a lot of similarities, I thought, in the way the narrator acted. And I thought, well, perhaps that's what she's gone into. She went to the city. She was a journalist. She was working for, she worked for a law firm. So she was a very accomplished woman, but she also talked about in parts of the book, it was all over in different chapters saying, in another life, this woman would be my friend. In another life, I would sit down for coffee with this person. So she had that life in the city. She's gone now to this place we don't know in the country somewhere to look after her brother. And I'm like, why is she going back to look after her brother? Why can't he look after himself? So there was all these things. And then, of course, the really weird community. And I felt like I was reading a horror story at times because of the mutilations of some of the animals that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't read this without having a very vivid image in my mind. And so, there's a lot going on in this book.
It's what you say, like, why would she do all that? And I think through the book, like, she is on this journey of self-discovery and figuring things out about herself and why she just always has been the way she has been. And that's the thing. Maybe she doesn't know any different. Like, if from her, since she was born, if she's always just been doing something for others, and there's that selfless side to her, that's what she's doing. So it's kind of like, this can be a case for many people, whether it's someone who's a working career woman and then puts everything aside for her children, or people who devote themselves to, their partner, and maybe they have a more hectic lifestyle, so one person takes the back seat, or you do have someone who's elderly and aging, and now suddenly you've become the primary caretaker, and a part of you has to give up what you want to help this person. So that's a hard thing to do, and not everyone does that. Some people just choose to be selfish, and like you could say, is hire a nurse next door and get someone else to help you. But there was a reason that I think she kind of thought she was there and needed to be there, and that was her calling. And she had those moments. I loved the moments in the garden or with Bert and things like that. It seemed a little bit more like a normal life, and then suddenly, like she would go out and it was just really weird and eerie. And I think that comes to, could you put yourself in a position like that? Could you live somewhere where you almost have the scarlet letter for some weird reason that nobody wants to approach you, nobody wants to talk to you, can't even have a cup of coffee and a slice of pie? You know?
Isn't that all we want in life?
Yes,
I like your take on it, Tanya, because I was thinking that maybe they had, crossed the pond, like maybe they were somewhere in Europe in a very rural area. But I like your take on it probably being somewhere, it could be somewhere here in North America, but old school community where the role of women is very much what we might consider, somewhat backwards today, and not where most women want to be. The timeline, I was thinking, okay, what time frame are we in? And then I was thinking, is she some kind of a spirit? Like, is she ghostly? Is she of another world with some of the weird and odd things that were happening? And are we just not being offered, like when she's switching from a different century into another? I don't know. I was kind of like Outlander in my mind. I don't know. Just so many questions.
Well, and there's a part in the book where it talks about that, she can't understand their language. And I kept trying to figure out, like, what is their language? But then the author Sarah writes in there, she says that they can speak English, they choose not to. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. Like how many times have you gone to go visit a place and they speak English, but they're not going to.
Yeah.
They're not going to.
Yeah.
And so that sort of put a layer on it. And I thought, well, that's rather interesting. And they didn't want to have anything to do with her. They didn't trust her. I almost thought that she was like a mythical creature to them. Just sort of what you were saying, Deb. Like, what is she? Is she is she real? Is this? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there that I really want to ask the author about in creating the narrator as her main character. And maybe we're not supposed to figure it out. I don't know, but I did want to figure it out. I wanted to know where she was from, and the author also talks about Americana. So then I thought, okay, well, they're in the States somewhere. So she keeps throwing out these things, which makes the reader go, okay, she's here. Oh, no, she's not here. Okay, they can speak English. It's very confusing, I thought. But you just wanted to get to the heart of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think there was a point where some readers have said it's a book about nothing but everything, right? Like it's just sort of a day in the life of...
It's for your interpretation, I guess, right? Because usually we read books and they're like, these are the characters, this is what they do, this is where they live, this is what the town is like. And here you're just like, you're just trying to figure it out and picture where it could be. So for me, it was like a place in I don't know why I was thinking like Northern Ireland or something. Like that's where my mind was going. It wasn't feeling like the States, but it felt like this was years ago. But then it's like, going on a Microsoft Teams meeting and doing this and having such a modern home with all this stuff. And so I'm like, no, it's happening in the now, but she's living like women would in the past.
Yeah. That was, and she was still doing like the audio transcribing for the law firm. She was still doing that. And what about the relationship? And I think this is a really great relationship. Bert. I love that little dog.
Oh, I know.
Little three-legged scruffian. And she...
without
she
testicles.
Developed a relationship. I know. She developed a relationship with this little guy. And I really I really liked that. And then when her brother comes back from wherever he was, he takes Bert's bed from her room and puts it back downstairs and kind of breaks that relationship again. So it feels like every time she tries to kind of connect, something is broken. It's taken away from her.
Yeah, that seems like really sad because like she didn't really have a relationship with their siblings. She had a big family and, she didn't really say much about the parents, but you're right. Like she just seems like she didn't have any kind of relationship with anybody. The way, her brother almost like treated her, like that's why I was like, what, is there something specific about her that this is why she's being treated a certain way? But that didn't seem like that because, like you said, she was educated, she was smart, she knew what she was doing. And then it's like even picking up these skills, like why, like working in the cow shed and doing all this just to appease people. And that's it. Maybe it's just about like this people-pleasing generation. We, end up doing things a lot of times for people that we don't want to do. And so when you read it, you're like, maybe I need to look at my life and be a little more selfish with things and not try to impress everybody.
Yeah, maybe if this story was about getting, when you say, like, looking for the likes, the shares, on TikTok,
validations,
or other, social media, like, okay, if I do this, I'll get a like, I'll get a share, I'll get more followers. So perhaps that is what her life became. I mean, it had always been that way since she was a little girl.
So let's post videos of cleaning out cow sheds and see if that works for us. Oh my gosh!
Well, I think there's a phrase in the book where I really feel for the narrator because she is fighting throughout the whole book. It's like they talk about she's constantly at war with herself, that she wants to be good, full of faith, to be invisible, but at the same time acknowledge the urges and feelings that she has to be her own woman. I mean, 2 places in this book, Sarah mentions that she had relationships with men and women that were both, nothing happened. And then she had a relationship with this girl at 16 years old. And she fell in love with her, but something happened. And then this woman like hated her for years. And I just feel like I wanted to know more about why she wasn't able to have these relationships. And maybe that's because she was at war with who she was, who she's supposed to be, living up to expectations. If there's faith involved, then maybe she felt like she had to be devout. She had to be, a certain way, and she couldn't be herself. So maybe the author was making some generalizations about that. I'm not sure. So, so many more questions, I felt. Like I wanted to know a little bit more.
I feel like this one I need to reread. It's one of those novels. I think, it takes a bit, but I didn't read it in one go, but maybe it would make more sense. Or I feel like you could read it a few times and pick up some different things, like watching a movie. Like sometimes you watch it the second time and you're like, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice this. And maybe things make a little bit more sense. But definitely an interesting novel.
And I think that the physical part of reading, I think our readers, you kind of have to let sentence structure the way you normally would read kind of go out the door. And you really have to buy into how the author has written this book, which is a lot of commas, right? She goes on and on and on, comma, where I think, you could use periods, but it's a style that she used. I want to know why she used that style. But as a reader, you kind of have to let go, I think, from myself, a frustration of like, oh, I find this difficult. But then you let it go and you just read the words on the page. Read the words on the page, read the commas where she put them, and just kind of go with that. So I thought that was an interesting thing just style-wise in how the author wrote this book. It's one of those things.
Do you think maybe she wanted us to struggle because the main character was struggling in different worlds? The way she styled
that's
it
good,
for
Deb.
us? Thanks.
Yeah. And it's like, she won a Giller Prize for it. She was nominated for the Booker Prize. So it's like there is, something beyond maybe what I was comprehending in here, because it is a piece of great work and great literature, but it definitely sits with you, and you can kind of relate to certain parts, like the isolation, if you felt that at times, and just, again, that journey of your self-discovery and what you're willing to do for someone. You can put yourself in situations, but then you're reading about this, this phantom pregnancy and these little piglets and this, and you're like, I don't know what this part, or when she went to the church and then she was in front of everyone, I was like, what's happening here?
Yeah, having never gone to church, she goes to church at the end of the book and she stands at the pew and she addresses the people. But then she made all those little reed men. Remember, she made little reed men out of. She started making stuff, and she didn't realize she knew how to do it. She took like branches and stuff, and was able to weave baskets. And I thought that's rather curious, And then she made these little reed men, and she dropped them off in town at various places, like just randomly. No one saw her do it. And then the townspeople gather. She sees them gather up after her cafeteria experience. She sees them gather up her little reed men that she built. And they dug a grave and they put them in there. And I'm like, well, that's a little slap in the face, isn't it?
Yeah, isn't it?
Do you think that...
So, I don't know.
Do you think maybe she's got some kind of trauma from her childhood? A lot of stories you hear people block it out, and maybe there's some kind of guilt, and now that's why she's living this kind of obedient lifestyle because of something. And so in her past, she knew how to do all this stuff, and then it's like you kind of block it out, and as an adult, sometimes things resurface.
Yeah. Or
Very
is
true.
what she is sharing with us actually happening? Did those things actually happen? Were people unkind to her? Or was this just part of what is wandering around in her mind?
Oh, interesting.
That's interesting.
I'm interpreting different things as we continue to talk about it.
Well, no, but that's good. That's why we have these discussions is to because we're all, we all have different interpretations of the book. And I love that. So we put out these things and it's like, I never thought of that. that. So maybe the world that she saw was in her own head. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
It's definitely one to get some answers from the author to kind of figure it all out.
Yeah, absolutely.
If she would help us with that, or just leave it up to us to just
if
be
she
in
would
our
care
thoughts.
to share.
But yeah, definitely one of those novels that I feel if you are going to give it a go, stick with it, because that's what most people who have read it will give you the advice to do. And just kind of see how you interpret it. And also very excited to share during our next episode, we will be talking to the author of Study for Obedience, Sarah Bernstein. So if you do have any questions for her, you can always reach us on the Stingray Podcast social media channels. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter or X. So feel free to find us there, and we will hopefully get a little bit more clarification on this book where we need it, at least. And happy to announce our next novel, What Wild Women Do, from Karma Brown. Two women's lives unexpectedly intertwine in this intriguing dual timeline novel from the #1 internationally best-selling author. And apparently it's a story about two women whose lives are 50 years apart, but who seem to be destined to meet with a mystery at the center of this novel.
Love it.
Ooh, I can't wait to get into that one.
Yeah, so that is our next read. As always, lovely chatting with you both. But Study for Obedience, Sarah Bernstein, if you are looking for a book to do a deep dive with, I think this one would be the one.
Indeed.
Perfect. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for kicking back and relaxing with us. We hope you'll join us again on Relaxing Reads.